All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back today. We're going to be talking about animal rights, and we're going to be talking about fighting for animal rights and the kind of the history of that. We got somebody today who is doing just that. We've got animal rights activist Doug Maw. How you doing today, Doug?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, been a busy couple of weeks, and yeah, loving it.
Cool. Yeah, so let's jump into the big story, which is a lot of animal rights activists affiliated with Animal Rising, this animal rights group, were arrested at the Grand National Horse Race. 118 of them, like running onto the field and stuff. Tell me a story. What happened?
So the Grand National is probably the most dangerous race for horses in the UK. If not the world. The number of deaths there is far higher than any other race. So it's a good focal point for animal rights activists to show and highlight the dangers and exploitation and unjust way horses are treated in the horse racing industry by going to the Grand National and demonstrating in some way. And there has been a history of demonstrations at the Grand National. It's usually a few activists outside making a few chants and, protesting, maybe leafleting, stickering, that kind of thing. But Animal Rising wanted to do something different. They wanted a mass protest outside, and they wanted to try and stop the race. So sadly, 3 horses died at the meeting, including one over the first fence at the Grand National, which we'd delayed by 15 minutes. By some of us managed to get on the track. 2 people actually glued onto one of the fences, but the police ripped their hands apart, despite the fact that they were covered in glue. Didn't bother waiting to do it properly and safely with the correct solutions to separate. They were just keen to get them off as soon as possible. So they managed to delay it. Some people will say that was a failure because it didn't stop the race happening, but I'd say it's a massive success for a couple of reasons. One, it did stop it for a little while, but the main success is that it's made not just a national conversation, it's become an international conversation. People are talking about it all over, and the fact that they did YouGov, who are a massive polling company in the United Kingdom, they did a poll the day after the Grand National where over 60% of the public want the Grand National banning. That's a huge achievement. So when people are a minority and, people, we're extremists, we're not speaking for the majority, 62% is a significant victory on what is essentially, throughout history, even when I was a little kid, I remember almost everyone bets on the Grand National. People who never bet in their lives bet on the Grand National. Workplaces all have a sweepstake, and you draw out of a hat which horse you're going to get in that race. And it's part of the British culture. So for 60+% to be against it and wanting banning just shows that what Animal Rising have done is made this so visible to the public that the horse racing fraternity cannot hide how cruel and significantly damaging this is.
Have you seen the tide turn and the paradigm shift as far as young people and veganism compared to maybe what you remember from the before times?
Yeah, I think things are changing. I think we're at a moment right now, and I think we're at a key moment right now where things are changing significantly. There was a change about 6 years ago where veganism had a bit of a spurt, and I'd say the growth in veganism has been phenomenal the last 6 years, roughly 6, maybe even 7 years. It's grown, out of proportion. However, I wouldn't say there are necessarily more or better activists in that time than previously. So when I went vegan, 27 years ago, I didn't even know what a vegan was until a year before I went vegan, and there were certainly not products in shops, the foam eats, whatever, that kind of thing. You couldn't even find plant-based milks in the shops. So it wasn't a thing in terms of that. But there were a lot of activists, animal rights activists back then. And now I'd say there are a lot more people eating plant-based who may or may not call themselves vegan than there were back then. But there were probably more committed activists back then. So there are a lot of activists now. Don't get me wrong, but the proportion of vegans who were activists back then was almost 100%. If you were a vegan, you were an activist.
Isn't that interesting? It's like what do you account for that? What is it? Because is it more illegal to be an activist, and that's why people don't do it, or?
I mean, that's part of it. People don't want to get arrested, and there is a danger of getting arrested. I mean, I was arrested at the Grand along with 117 others, and you get arrested for all kinds. The day I got back from the Grand National, I had to go to the police station about another animal rights matter. The police are very keen to prove I'm involved with, but I'm not sure they can. So yeah, there are risks, and not everyone's comfortable taking those risks. But you don't have to do things that risk getting you arrested to be an activist. The kind of activism I used to see when I was younger was just people pulling up on the street, putting a little trestle table up, lots of leaflets and information, and just talking to people. That was it. And now it's moved on. We've got some brilliant activism now, and you'll see some of the what you might call influencers, whatever, within the vegan movement. Some of the resources they've got, fantastic, and they're being duplicated by outreaches across the country and across the world. So if I do an outreach, I'm doing one on tomorrow outside local castle. Sounds bizarre, but yeah, they've got a bait with snares and traps on it, and yeah, so I'm doing a photo set. We'll have TV screens showing footage. We'll have all kinds of different things available to us. Back in the day I'm talking about, you just had loads and loads of leafleters and things like that, people talking. So yeah, it's changed. And the way we do activism has evolved, and it's reaching a bigger audience. So I'm a bit of a Luddite because I'm in my 50s now. I'm not that technically aware yet. I started up a TikTok account. Someone was telling me, you've got to do it. So I did it. And I was very, very wary, and I put up a few. Most of them got took down by TikTok for, because.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They can say it's breaching their policy for whatever reason, whether it's you arguing with hunters or it's contains animal cruelty, where it's okay for them to show hunting, but if you show what happens with hunting, or what happens in a slaughterhouse, it's taken down. Anyway, so I flirted with using that format for a little while. I'm still using it, just not as much. But I did one, and it reached 1 million views. And I'm like, wow, this is you're not going to get that on a street with a bunch of leaflets. So I welcome the new ways of doing things. Yes, there are limitations and hoops you have to jump through to pass all their criteria, but change is good. We've got to embrace it and look at ways we can reach people. And it also means people can do activism without the risk of getting arrested as much
right.
or big, because it's not just arrest. Some people just get anxious dealing with the public, and I think people are far more open to talking about that now than they were maybe 20 years ago. So if people are anxious, the last thing they want to do is stand in the middle of the street trying to persuade people of their point of view. It's not easy, and you will get trolls and people giving you abuse, that kind of thing. So yeah. So what I said about activism not being as key to veganism as it used to be, I'm talking proportionately. I'd say there's far more activists now than there were when I started out, but proportionately there isn't if every vegan was an activist, the world would be changing a lot quicker. And I know not every vegan can be an activist in secret, because there are all kinds of reasons why people cannot or will not engage with the public. And very, very valid reasons.
Yeah, what do you think is the most effective out of all the? I mean, obviously, yeah, that's the one thing about the technology is that I think that's helping the movement, because we're able to spread things from our bedrooms and our pajamas to other people that might benefit from seeing this kind of stuff that we post. But what do you think is the most effective means of converting people nowadays? Is it just vegan food being delicious, or is it these TVs that you set up in the street and has the footage there, or what's working for you?
So different strokes for different folks, really. It's different things will appeal to different people, which is why I welcome a variety of forms of activism. I think almost everyone can do some form of activism. So what works for whenever I'm mentoring someone who's new to the movement, or just giving advice to someone who asks, I'd say to them, try a wide range of different forms of activism. Find which one you really feel like you fit and you enjoy, and try and focus on 2, maybe 3 forms, just to give yourself a bit of balance and a wider way of doing things. But don't do everything. Try everything, but don't do everything, because you'll burn out quick, or you'll get disappointed with people who aren't your fit, do things a way that you're not comfortable with. But it doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it's not for you. So I hesitate to criticize other forms of activism to what I enjoy doing. I enjoy most forms of activism. Do you know, one of the most encouraging things I saw, I was sat in a little cafe in the Lake District, and there were 2 little old ladies sat there with their tea and their bun, and they were talking about veganism, and they were talking about the different forms of plant milks. And she said, "Oh, mine's got soy milk." And the other one said, "Oh, I like oat milk." These little old ladies with their tea, and I was listening in, smiling away, and they were talking about they got talking about what had prompted this. And they, I was one day sat having a chat with someone in a shop or whatever it was. Might have been a bus. I don't remember now. It was a while ago. But she said what had struck her and what had made her start the conversation is the person she spoke to was wearing a T-shirt that said "Dairy is scary," and it had prompted a conversation about what do you mean. And I'm listening in, thinking this is fantastic. So someone has just gone out with a T-shirt on, and that's had a ripple effect to these little old dears who have then made my day. I beaming for the rest of it. Someone could have ran over my foot, spat at me, shouted abuse at me down this. They wouldn't have took the smile off my face. That really made my day. So, and that, some people will say that's not activism. I disagree. I think it is. You put on a T-shirt, it's had an effect. So, I'm not encouraging people to just do wearing T-shirts, but I'm just saying if you feel you can do other things, then do.
Yeah, start there. Start at T-shirts, work your way up. Sure, yeah. But we need everybody.
My personal favourite form of activism, in terms of what I do, is liberating animals. So if I can liberate animals, especially wild animals. So a lot of people think I'm going to really enjoy liberating animals, and they assume you're talking about farmed animals or animals that are being tested on. So you might rescue a beagle, or you might rescue a pig or a sheep or chickens or a cow, that kind of thing. I actually really, and don't get me wrong, I've done those things as well, and I really enjoyed it. It gives you a really good sense of satisfaction and worth, and just in knowing you've saved that animal's life, and that it's great. But there is no better feeling. If I could describe the greatest high I've ever had, it's opening a cage in a field that has birds in it and watching them birds fly away. You don't have to put them in a sanctuary. You don't have to, they just fly away and they go about their life. And it's an amazing feeling to do that. That's what really inspires me. What motivates me to get up in the morning is not my job. It is not, it's not even going out and doing outreach, although I love doing that. It's knowing that there's a chance at some point in that day that an animal's going to be free because of what I've been able to do for them. So that's my favourite form of activism. I really enjoyed seeing, when I was up in the northeast in Newcastle, visited some friends there. They took me to a vigil, which I thought could be difficult with my background, but they were really cool people, made me feel very welcome and validated my presence there. But what I really enjoyed when I was up there was I saw them doing this thing where they were just taking out vegan food into the city centre and giving it away. And, people were very, very, especially in the current economic climate, were really grateful for food. And it was promoting a vegan message saying it's, as you said in your question, when you were asking what is it that gets, is it the great vegan food? This is perfect because you're giving people things that show them it's normal. It is normal. There is nothing weird about vegan food. In fact, it's weird to have something that isn't vegan and call it food. So, because they're not food, they're beings. So it's just seeing these lovely people give up their time, their money and their resources to go out into a city centre and hand out free food connected to a message. So they're giving them a message with it and the people are enjoying it. And, it's fantastic. So all these different types of things are great. I also take part in We Stand for the Animals, Anonymous for the Voiceless. That's that style of outreach as well. So I do that as well. And I get some great conversations and they're just as valid as any other form of outreach because people go vegan because of it.
Yeah. I'm constantly saying it with people that on the internet. Some people just run the other direction right away and say, I've heard this before. I don't believe it. And I don't want to believe it. And some people are slightly open-minded. And for every one of those where I chase them around with the logic about why to do it, eventually it feels like sometimes somebody's walking away with the right information in their head, and that feels great.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So how did you get your start in life noticing or understanding, hey, nature is this special thing. Animals are these special creatures. When was the point in your life that you kind of came into that? And when did you come into the activism and what were you doing?
So it's going to sound a little bit all over the place, really, because I think I had an affinity with animals most of my life. And that's going to sound strange, bearing in mind that from the age of 16 to my early 20s, I was working in animal agriculture. So at 16, I went to work as a butcher and they moved me into a slaughterhouse. So for 2 years there, I was working in slaughterhouses and then moved on to another slaughterhouse. And then I ran a poultry farm. So before that, I'd say I had an affinity with animals. In fact, this is going to sound fairly sick, but at the age of 16, so that would be 1985, we were in the midst of the Thatcher years and unemployment was huge. It was a massive problem. I think there were around 4 million unemployed at the time, and it was impossible to get a job. 16 years old, I wasn't really interested in education. I've been, I was good academically. I just wasn't interested. I was a bit of a rebel, so I didn't really want to be in school. I wanted to work, so I left school at 16. And the only options available to you were if you didn't get, you didn't qualify for any kind of support if you didn't take part in this scheme, government scheme called the Youth Training Scheme. So they sign you up to it, and for the princely sum of £27.30 a week, you had to, bear in mind we're talking 1985, but it was still very small. You had to do this job, and they ask you, it's a bit like a careers advice kind of session. They ask you what you'd be interested in. So I gave them a couple of options and said I'd love to work with animals because I've always loved animals. So their idea of I don't know if it was a kick in the teeth because they didn't like me, or if it was just their sick sense of humour, but they thought putting me as a butcher and a slaughterman would be a good place to put someone who said they loved animals. So
that's some sick and twisted shit, my friend.
Yeah.
Jesus.
You get no income. Literally no income. So homeless. So I took the job. I remember going the first day to the slaughterhouse and thinking, am I going to be able to handle this, and trying to blank what I'm seeing. But bear in mind, at 16 years old, I was just getting into in a few years really, but just getting good at boxing and, using a gym, that kind of thing. So it's quite a macho environment. I played rugby, so it was almost like a challenge to my masculinity to be able to handle being in that situation. So I blanked out the aspect of it that's right in front of your eyes, the cruelty that was going on, and just thought, I can do this. I'm a man, I'm a strong guy, whatever. I'll use it as a means of keeping fit because it's quite a physically demanding job. So I literally looked at that job as a workout and tried to ignore massive mistake. We can get into that later if you want, but that had a huge psychological impact on me over time that I wish I would have known at the time it would have done, and then I would have, I'd have risked no income. But getting back to when I first had an affinity with animals, all my life pretty much. Yeah. I was drawn to animals as a little child. I'd be fascinated. I know it's a perverse thing because I don't like zoos. I think they're cruel, but when you're a child and you're getting access to zoos, safari parks, that kind of thing, you're going in and you're seeing animals and you just think they're beautiful, wonderful creatures. You want to, if anyone doesn't like animals, I think there's something wrong with them. They're magnificent, just beautiful in their own rights, outside of our interests. And I used to love watching the wildlife shows, David Attenborough, that kind of thing, and Natural World. Always had an affinity with them. I grew up in a house where we always had German Shepherds, so anyone harmed an animal, I'd get quite upset with them. So that's why I said it's going to seem a bit perverse the way I put this, because all my life I'd considered myself an animal lover, and yet at 16 I moved into agriculture. And then once you're in it, you find if you're looking for more work, people say, well, what do you do? And that's what you do. And they say, well, did you know there's a job at this slaughterhouse or at this farm or this butcher's? So you end up in that cycle until you get out of it, really.
Yeah. They used to say, people need jobs, people need sausages, you're young or whatever, maybe. And the culture, this is the problem I find too, is that the culture makes us feel what is culture basically dictates to us what is okay. And most of us, surprisingly, as we know now that we go vegan, and then we look at the rest of the people like, everybody could do this or whatever. But at some point you have some realization, and the culture really does dictate to people what is okay, right?
Yeah, sure. And it's culturally normative to consume animal products, whether that's in terms of what you're eating or what you're wearing, or to enjoy entertainment that involves the use of animals. It's like I said, we started out by talking about the Grand National. That's one of the biggest cultural events in the UK. Involves the mass exploitation of horses and results in their early demise. It's prevalent. So culturally, animals are judged, and I still get this today when people are debating it. They'll talk about, well, if it wasn't for us doing this with animals, they wouldn't exist. That kind of argument, which is patently ridiculous, because they have a value in themselves outside of what we can use them for. If you don't judge people by how you can use them, at least I hope not. So why judge another being by their utility to you?
It's an inability to look outside your own eyes just for a split second and bridge your empathy over to some other living creature just for a minute. Like, isn't that the basis of watching a movie? Like, you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes just for a little bit. There's a lot of sociopathic people that just can't enjoy that kind of experience or have that experience and say, look, obviously the cow's in pain. Obviously he's crying or whatever. Some people, it's... that they don't know. They don't have that sense. And I guess that's what frightens me. I think that's why a lot of vegans turn into misanthropes. Animal lovers turn in, they go, Mark Twain said, the more I love my dog, or the more I learn about people, the more I love my dog. Something like this. Yeah. Seems fitting. So what about hunt sabs? I mean, people talk about this a lot. What is going on? Because I'm not from England, but this is really a thing that's going on in England. So can you explain this to me?
Sure. Well, when I started hunt sabbing actually before I became vegan. So early 1990s, I started when hunting foxes with a pack of hounds, and followed by a load of people on horses, and supported by terrier men who dig out foxes once they've gone to ground. So that's what it is. It was legal back then. It meant we were, rather than stopping people from killing foxes, which was the intent, you spent a lot of the time just trying to evade the police, trying to arrest you for trespass. Because you're running over farmland and private estates, trying to stop them, which we still are doing. We still are committing trespass when we follow hunts, but they are now the ones that, if they're honest, are breaking the law, because they are not allowed, since the Michael Foster bill in the early part of this century, to hunt a fox with hounds. They are allowed to still allowed to shoot foxes and use a maximum of two dogs to flush out a fox to shoot, but they can't use a pack of hounds to chase and kill a fox. And they are all still doing it, all these hunts. And hunt sabs will go out. Some of them prefer to call themselves hunt monitors since the ban, so we're monitoring rather than sabotaging the hunt. So in terms of sabotage, what you might do is lock gates, put down all kinds of things to try and prevent the hounds from following the foxes. Like, I still carry citronella spray, so if a fox runs by, I'll spray citronella between them and the hounds. You don't spray them at the hounds because, why would you do that? You're an animal lover. You spray it between them so that they lose the scent. So that's really all that is. That's to mask the scent. And you might accidentally come across a gate that they're going to use to get through. Should that somehow find itself padlocked, they're going to struggle to get through it. So occasionally that happens. But the idea is to watch them, catch them, committing illegal acts, which is hunting with hounds. They will always say, that they've laid a scent and the hounds are following the scent. But if you look at the routes they take, which take them over railways, over major roads, through really thick, overgrown areas that you would never lay a trail through there. The dogs are trained to follow the scent of the fox. So they are going to follow the scent. What they'll always say is they've laid a trail, but accidentally a fox happened to come across that trail and the hounds then killed the fox. That's what they'll say. And so it was an accident. Absolutely. They didn't target foxes. We've caught them several times. The reason it's made the news a lot is because over the last 2 years really, is because we've been so successful at catching them. So technology again. We've got drones, we've got hidden cameras. So we'll put a camera up where they've got a false earth, where they can flush a fox. We caught some of my friends from London area, they caught fox hunt, digging a fox out of a false earth that they built to encourage foxes in, and literally stabbing the fox to death with a fork. These people are, I can't say what I think, but you can guess what I think. It's cruelty beyond reason, and the hunt are behind it all. And they will. The good news is a lot of the hunts are closing down because landowners are getting sick of them breaking the law and being found to break the law. And sadly, the punishments for them are very, very low. They get fines, which, a lot of their support are very wealthy. They can pay for them very easily. They do something to us, nothing happens. This last year, I was in a car. There was 7 of us in this car, obviously quite big vehicle, and we were rammed by a farmer with a teleloader. So the forks, a bit like a forklift, straight into the back of our vehicle, missed the fuel tank by less than an inch, and went straight through the side of the vehicle to where one of us had been sitting about 2 minutes prior to that, and not even charged that person. There was another sab in Northamptonshire who was deliberately ran down. You might have seen the footage, deliberately ran down by a hunt supporter. You see the car pick up the pace and drive straight into her. She's very lucky to not be killed by that. Woman didn't even get remanded in custody. And I think, I don't know what's happening with it. It's not gone to court yet, but the charge, I believe, is GBH and something like that. Whereas it's clearly premeditated attempt to kill someone. But anyway, yet the woman who they targeted and hit was remanded in custody for allegedly stalking. Which is, they're just upside down. Sadly, even though we're winning in that hunts are getting found out, landowners are getting sick of having them on their land, and they're getting embarrassed, and the law are getting embarrassed by the constant revelations that we keep filming, because we've all got body cams now when we're out stabbing. We can film them doing some of the things they do, and as long as you evade them, they can't beat you up and steal your cameras. And if you're live streaming anyway, they can't deny it. It's getting embarrassing for a lot of them, because they're just constantly getting caught out, and they're running out of lies. Really, they can't keep lying if they're being caught red-handed. So I'd love to see the end of hunting. I'm not quite sure what I'd do with my Saturdays, but it's a bit of a buzz stopping them. if you can save a fox, and I quite enjoy winding them up as well. I've got to be honest. I do enjoy winding them up because these are evil people. I literally think they're evil. I mean, there's levels of animal abuse. All animal abuse is wrong, but I think it takes a particularly evil person to take pleasure out of seeing dogs rip apart a wild animal.
Right.
I think at first it's sick, and so if I can do anything to make their lives difficult, I will do.
I saw a video recently. It was about 50 dogs or something. Where do they house these dogs humanely?
They put them in a big building. They call them kennels. They're not like looked after like a family dog. And if you look up Dale Vince, I don't know if you haven't interviewed him, maybe you should. He owns Ecotricity and Forest Green Rovers Football Club, which is the world's only vegan football club. He's amazing, and he filmed what happens at some of these kennels. So what happens is that once the dogs aren't quick enough, they shoot them, and they use them as the reason he filmed it is because he produces green energy, and he wanted to show that people who produce biofuels include, you can guess what. So they're shooting these dogs and throwing them into biofuel along with dairy calves, like male calves. Lots of animals that are shot and disposed of on farms are thrown into these biofuel bins. Some of them are actually shot and thrown to the hounds. They chuck them in these kennels and they will eat them. And we wonder why there's so many diseases going on out in the countryside.
That's like the most expensive firewood that you could burn. It's like, this is not just horrible, but it's inefficient.
Yeah.
Well, I figured we'd get into the dark stuff, but yeah, I mean, this is why most people like me are a card-carrying misanthrope, and we've just had about just enough of it. So how do you stay calm? What's your mantra? What do you do to keep yourself from, wanting to tear somebody a new asshole?
I don't always. I wish I could. I quite often can't do that. And there are times when cameras have to be switched off.
Right.
However, that is not the best approach. The best approach is to be calm. We want to expose these people as being evil, cruel, and, to act in a way that you could get caught on film, behaving in a way that they could show the public and make it look like you're the aggressive ones or you're doing bad things. That doesn't help us. It goes again, and if it doesn't help us, it doesn't help the animals. So the ideal is to be able to deal with it calmly, rationally, and just say, quite often if I come across an incident where people are out in the field, like the hunters behaving despicably towards an animal, I will be filming them, and I will tell them I'm filming them. Say, look, you're on film. You get, what you're doing to that horse, what you're doing to that dog, what you're trying to do to that fox. You're being filmed, and you're just gonna doing yourself no favors. Thank you. Try and come up with that kind of perspective. It doesn't always happen. I sometimes lose my shit. It is. You use your judgment. So if there's no way you can physically stop someone, if you're surrounded by about 50 supporters and hunters, whatever, and they're doing something that is harmful to an animal, all you can do is film and make it clear to them, you're doing what you're doing is wrong, and you're being filmed, and you're going to be reported. And sometimes that's enough to stop them and make them panic. and encourage landowners to not let them back on their land. So that's the ideal. And some of the other things happening in animal rights at the movement at the minute are encouraging me to take a different approach and to be calm and to be more, more professional in how you approach. We
were talking about that before, and I wanted to get your opinion on, just from your point of view, tell people the animal rights groups of, before, and what are the main animal rights groups today? What's your kind of take on them?
So, I've done actions before and continue to that you'd probably describe as animal liberation front stuff. So, liberate animals, or you're doing damage to things that support animal injustice. So that's a very, very direct action, very confrontational way of doing things. Almost aggressive. You're wanting to stop people physically and stop what they're doing physically. So it's a violent way of doing things. So if you're causing damage, it's violence in a way. If you're physically stopping people from causing harm, it's a violent approach. It's assertive, but it's definitely violent. And I'm not saying violence is always wrong, because it's worked. It's definitely worked for. If you look to, I think it's around, it's the anniversary. I think it's 38 years now since breeches was freed in America. And that was that kind of action, a direct action, violent approach. So smashing things up and literally taking animals from other people, from their property. So that's typical of some of the actions I've been involved with. And I'd compare that now to this sort of DXC, Animal Rising, meet the victims. That kind of approach now is totally different, and I think it's the right time for it. It seems to be. I think they've hit something here. They've really hit a mood. I think people are just sick of confrontation. They're sick of having to fight all the time. They're also sick of failing to convince politicians and industries. So you've got to do something. So if you're not getting anywhere with lobbying, petitioning, that kind of thing, and you're not getting anywhere with, or at least not anywhere significantly with the direct action that's confrontational, what do you do? So the new approach that seems to be hitting, the current zeitgeist seems to be this passive resistance, but it involves direct action. So like the Animal Rising events that have been very successful here recently. So they freed beagles from MBR. They've had this massive success with the Grand National, which, no, they didn't stop the race, but they did create a huge dialogue, and as I said, it's changed the perspective of the UK. So to go from that it just shows me that it's not just the measure of success, it's the amount of people joining in. So when I've been involved with groups that have called for action to go to, for example, MBR acres, and free beagles. I've been involved with groups that called to action to that, and you've got a few people turned up. Animal Rising do it, who were previously called Animal Rebellion when they did the MBR thing, and loads of people turning up. They call for people to go to the Grand National, I don't know how many hundreds were outside at the demo, but there were 118 of us arrested doing the actual direct action. But notwithstanding us, there was all those out the front demonstrating. So that's hundreds and hundreds of people because they like the approach of Animal Rising. Not all of them were Animal Rising people, by the way. Plenty of people have just turned up off their own bat because they just want to stop the Grand National. So they might not have had anything to do with Animal Rising, but the vast majority of them there were. And that's because they like that approach. So the non-violent method they preach, because they come from the same kind of background as Extinction Rebellion and groups like that, where the belief is that passive resistance, it's kind of Gandhi approach, and Gandhi over Mandela, if you like. So that approach is definitely appealing to a lot of the younger generation. And so if you look at the Animal Rising movement, a lot of their leaders are very young people, but they are, and they probably wouldn't like me calling them leaders either, facilitators, whatever, but they are beautiful people. They've got they're highly committed. I was in there as an activist of many years, taking the blows with everyone else. I mean, we were violently dealt with. These guys, people call them hippies. These guys were taking the blows as well. They were smiling, they were singing songs, and they were saying love to all. I got to say, this is so refreshing to see. My instinct is to fight back, but I was sort of affected massively by being with them. They just changed my perspective totally, just to see that and the power that has. These people who probably would have loved to fight, the security guards and the people around them would have probably loved to have a fight with us and get stuck into us. They don't get quite such a kick out of doing it when you're singing songs and telling them love to all. And I get it now. I really didn't get it, but I kind of do now. And, more power to them. I think they're going to take this movement onto new places, certainly in terms of volume of participants, because if people are comfortable to take direct action, traditionally people haven't been, because it's so violent. If they're going to get people comfortable to take direct action, then we're going to get more direct action, which means more free animals, which has got to be a good thing.
Yeah. And you just, so long as they don't label us terrorists, and then we can keep doing what we're doing. And then this event at the horse race made international news. So I would say it was a great success. But when I see these guys, Just Stop Oil guys, get dragged off the street by some angry trucker or something, I'd say I would get up off the street and just kick that trucker right in the nuts, because I have no impulse control when it comes to being bullied. But for the people that do, I think those are the strong people. And my hat's off to them. So
is, if a member of the public assaults you, not to complain. And it's up to the police if they decide to. So what the police will do, there was an example in the UK where a Just Stop Oil protester was quite badly assaulted by a member of the public, and the police charged them because they said what they did was just too much. Whereas another example, the Just Stop Oil protester actually got hit by a car deliberately. The police wanted to charge them. The Just Stop Oil people went to, I don't want to conflate this, by the way. We are not Just Stop Oil. We're animal rights.
Sure.
But this Just Stop Oil people went to court and defended the person who'd driven into them, and ended up creating a conversation with that person who has changed their whole mind and perspective. I'm not allowing people to assault you.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it's normal to respond in kind of assaulting. I'm just saying it's so powerful and effective to not respond, and seeing that yeah, it's a powerful thing to witness.
Wow, the power of mercy. Yeah, and that's it. And I hope that that the momentum keeps going. Just hopefully because of the technology and just this perfect storm of momentum. I don't know. It's just going so well, and all we can do is keep going. So, what's on the agenda for you next? What's the next move? Anything exciting in your world?
Yeah, I'm taking part in a personal perspective, taking part in a mini-series, documentary series about the meat industry. So because of my past, one of the episodes is going to be about basically the process of killing animals. So they're getting my perspective on that. I'm going to go do an interview outside one of the slaughterhouses where I worked, and they're going to come down here, me here as well. So that's on my thing, but those things are just incidental. I just will do the interview and then crack on with my activism. So I organise loads of local events, and I get involved with other people's local events. I'll go to vigils outside slaughterhouses. I'll go to street outreaches. I do my own ones as well, and I've arranged a series of protests outside the Duke of Norfolk's home. He's the guy, incidentally, who probably called the Kingmaker. So he was responsible for organising the Queen's funeral. He's also responsible for organising the coronation of who will be King Charles. And he owns vast tracts of land that he covers with snares and traps. I'm currently banned from his land for some reason, but it won't stop me protesting. And I'm sure other people will be going on his land and trying to get rid of the things that are left lying around, which are torturing and maiming and harming other animals. So yeah, that's a focus, short-term focus. I'm going to bring that to a crescendo around the coronation weekend. So I've got 3 events planned for that weekend. So that's a focus now. I'm also doing so this time of year, you get a lot of the shooting fraternity putting out traps, and I like to I like to go on country walks this time of year and see in the countryside that needs, and if I find litter, I'll get rid of it. So that's kind of a spring summer thing, and just loads and loads of activism. If I'm not doing activism, I would be depressed because of my background in what I did. I consider activism as my atonement. It will never be enough because the focus is always the animals, and it has to be. But if I stop for a minute, I go to some very dark places. So I'd rather not, So if I can keep busy and be doing activism as much as possible, I can avoid those dark places. Yeah. And me as well. I need to stay busy. PTSD is a hell of a thing, my friend. It's a hell of a thing. Yeah, I was actually told I'd got PITS, which is perpetrator-induced trauma syndrome, which was a new phrase on me. I actually tried therapy. Didn't work for me because it was probably too long since I was doing that thing. I just thought, give it a try. And it actually got me to revert to past behaviours. And my therapist said that's a normal way of coping when you're going back in the past, is to do something. But I'd given up drinking 7 years ago, which was I'd become, I'd say, an alcoholic as a way of coping with what I'd done. When I was working in that industry, I was very violent. I'd go out into pubs, and anyone looked at me, if I thought they were looking at me, I'd headbutt them, or punch. I was a not a person. So when you are doing therapy that gets you back to dealing with the way you dealt with things before, that's all well and good saying it's normal and acceptable to do. It's not normal or acceptable to get drunk and hit people. And I found I was starting to do that again. So I cut out the therapy and cut out the drinking again. So if I can stay focused on the animals and atone that way. I don't need the therapy. The animals are my therapy. Doing the liberations, like I said, quite excited about what Animal Rising have got planned. We've got a summer of Rising coming up. We've got so much on the go. I'm really impressed with what they're doing, and I just want to be on board. I want to ride that. That's going to be fun. Yeah, we're going to be interesting times ahead. I think you're going to be seeing a lot on the news over the next.
That's what I like to hear. So, well, obviously, we're going to have you back because every time that something happens and I read the news and I go and see that what's going on, I'm going to have you back. We'll talk again.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Anything you want to add before we go?
No, just if anyone's watching who is thinking about going vegan, I'm sure you've got links for them. If not, just go to veganlinks.com. And if you're interested in becoming an activist and you're afraid to, if anyone wants to ask me any questions, feel free to get hold of me on my socials, message me. I can give you advice and tips on what might or might not appeal to you depending on your interests, and what to avoid if you're risk averse, because there's always a way of doing stuff. Yeah. But that's it. Much dear brother, and peace. So everybody check out stuff. There should be some links down in the description of this video. Doug Maw, animal rights activist, wonderful human being. Thanks for coming. We're going to sign off. Vegan Rising, baby. Animal Rising.